Michael J. Rogan is the head of the Lilly Music Library, a branch facility of the Tish Library for Arts, Sciences, and Engineering at Tufts University. He received his music and library science master's degrees from Columbia University and has worked in the Boston area since 1987 and at Tufts since 1999. In June of 2017, Tufts migrated from using Innovative Interfaces Millennium product to Ex Libris's Alma and Primo library services and discovery platforms. After a pleasant short decade in what was then the music division of Boston Public Library, Patricia B.M. Tish Brennan moved into the groves of academe at the James P. Adams Library, Rhode Island College, where she maintains a delightful liaison relationship with the Department of Music, Theater, and Dance, among other liaisonships, and heads the Reference and Research Support Department within the library. A survivor of 4 library catalog transitions in her career, as well as being a person who has always relished a challenge and worked for positive change, she has found the latest ILS migration the most challenging so far. Alec McLane has been music librarian and director of the World Music Archives at Wesleyan University since 1998. He has graduate degrees in music composition and library science from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. He loves to go backcountry skiing in Vermont when he has time. And for those of you who are not here this morning, I will also reintroduce Andrea Cawelti. Former opera singer Andrea Cawelti is the John M. Ward Music Cataloger at Houghton Library, Harvard University. The Ward collection is world-renowned for its holdings in opera, ballet, musicals, and social dance music.
I am not on this panel, but I play the panel member on TV. No, I'm my technical services chair hat on my head. As many of you know, are no doubt painfully aware, numerous libraries in our region have recently migrated or are in the midst of migrating to new library service platforms. The NEMLA Technical Services Committee wanted to address this issue by sponsoring an overview of the process and some words of advice and perhaps warning from those already involved in migration or having recently completed it. The panelists represent 3 different schools, 2 different systems, Alma Primo and OCLC World Share Management Services, and both public and technical services. And before opening up the floor to questions and discussion, the panelists will talk about their own institution's experiences with pre-migration prep, data cleanup, and post-migration adjustments, material types and faceting, accessing EBSCO databases, and authorized access points, ending with a look at the OCLC World Share Management Service and the public interface. One thing to note, we have a far greater representation for discussion of the Alma Service Platform on our panel. So if you are currently using World Share Management Service or some other platform, your input in the discussion session will be particularly welcome. And now, without further ado.
Okay. I'm starting first with just sort of a general overview of the process. But before I start, I'm curious, how many people are planning to migrate in the next couple of years? Okay, how many people are in the midst of a migration right now? And how many people migrated just a couple of years ago? Okay, so it seems like this is pretty relevant to everybody. Or the folks that already migrated, this might all be old news. Another question, how many people are at a small enough institution where, even as music folks, you get to be pretty central to the process? Okay, just a few. And are the rest of you at larger institutions where really other people make the decisions and you just have to go along with them? So I come from Wesleyan. We went live in July of 2017, and we are a very small institution, so we definitely got to be extremely involved. I was the one cataloger on the migration team. So I'm going to talk about just the general process. I kind of think of it as 5 steps. So we did a lot of cleanup ahead of time. I think of migration as at least a 2-year process. There's a year of preparation, then there's your go live date, and then a year of tweaking afterwards, and perhaps even more. During that first year, there's also mapping decisions. I'll talk a little more about all of those. Hopefully you get some kind of sandbox environment that you can test things out in. There's your go live point and training right before and after, and then still plenty of cleanup afterwards. Luckily, so we work with Ex Libris, we went to Alma and Primo. They provide a lot of information and suggestions for data cleanup. There are several documents. This is just one example. The appendix has a great list of optional data preparations. So these are a few of the things we did. It's not just cleaning up bib records. Circulation and acquisitions, there's a lot of work that we did there. It's a great opportunity to kind of clear out old data you don't need anymore, old vendor records and expired patron records. Bibliographic data and item level data, there's some things that you have to clean up. For example, duplicate barcodes. Things just will not migrate properly. Location mismatches, our old system, you could set locations in holdings and in items, so if they weren't matched up, you have problems. Same thing with no 245 field, that's the title field. If there is none, the record doesn't migrate. Other things are less critical. So diacritics, it's lovely if they show up right, but it's still going to migrate. It'll just look weird. Fixed field coding, it affects material types, but it still migrates. It just doesn't quite look the way you want it to. Okay. So for catalogers, one thing that helped us a lot, we weren't entirely sure what the search capabilities and the batch change capabilities would be in Alma. Turns out they're way better, but we just didn't know what we could do and couldn't. So using what we did know about Voyager, we did a lot of adding of 9xx fields. For non-catalogers, that's your locally defined fields. There's no restrictions on what you do with those fields. So if there's a way we knew how to search for and bring together a bunch of records, then we'd add some kind of identifying text so that in Alma it was easy to search for that. So a couple of examples, holdings records that didn't have call numbers. Clearly they need to get fixed. We didn't have time to fix them before migration, but I put in something so it was very easy to search for those. Same thing, this wasn't so much a fix, but I just wanted to be able to find holdings records that had, for multi-volume sets or for serials, again, to potentially clean them up. And then, I forgot to ask, how many of you have to deal with ebook or e-resource record loads? So some of you. That was another thing that I wasn't sure how we were going to group those together. We had used different operator IDs for different packages, so added a lot of these fields. So this only works if you get to work closely with the systems library where you can do global data change in your current system. And depending on how much you get to work with systems, you may or may not have that capability. We did, and it was a huge help. So I think that's my biggest tip for catalogers. Mapping, I won't talk a lot about this, but this is things like mapping your location codes, acquisitions fund structures, circulation loan periods, loan rules. And again, this is a great opportunity to simplify. We radically simplified our loan rules a lot. It was great to have a sandbox. They did a migration 4 months ahead of time, but then put it in a sandbox environment so we could mess with that as much as we wanted and it wouldn't mess up our ultimate data. And it was great because we could evaluate the decisions we'd made, we could try out functionality, and we came up with a huge list of all these different scenarios or types of records we wanted to see. How did it migrate? How does it look in the new system? And then after, at the go live point, they do a new, they pull all of our data and load it again. And we went through exactly the same list. We were given a day or two, at the point that they migrated, we were given a couple days to test out all of our data and then approve the migration. And theoretically, if there'd been a really terrible glitch, we could have said, no, it's not acceptable, and they would have troubleshot the problems and done it over again, which is great. We wrote a lot of documentation ourselves, even though Ex Libris provides a ton, but it ended up being either too detailed or not detailed enough or not matching our local practices. And then we're still cleaning up a ton of things. Item statuses, material types, enumeration and chronology for multi-volume things. It works differently in the new system. Electronic resources that's the thing where we understand the least, and it's a huge paradigm shift. I won't even go into that. We use Google Sheets to track all of our projects. This is just a tiny portion of our huge sheet of projects we're still working on. And the last thing, this is kind of a segue into what Alec is going to talk about, just one particular thing about migration. This is specific from Voyager to Alma, so it might be different with other systems. In Voyager, in the item record, there was one field called item type that had two functions. It both said what the item is, like this is a CD, but it also affected loan rules. So we ended up with multiple material types because different things had to have different loan periods. So for example, CDs, they circulate one way, but all of our CDs in the World Music Archives they essentially don't circulate, or very limited circulation. So we had to have a separate item type for that. Alma splits those functions. So now there's something Alma material type that's just what the thing is. The couple of annoying things about this is on migration, I would have wished that they took that from Voyager item type, but they didn't. They take it from the fixed fields. And fixed fields are notoriously not that accurate. And also if you have one thing that has multiple, like let's say you have a DVD and CD set, it can only pick one of them. It doesn't apply to both of them. So we had a lot of cleanup, but then the next thing I didn't totally know before migration was that Primo doesn't even look at that field. This is what Alec is going to talk about. So for faceting, it doesn't matter what you put into that field, which is pretty annoying. And then they have a separate field for item policy, and that's what you can use for loan rules. So it's good that they've split those functions. I just wish material type talked more to Primo. And that's it for me. We'll do all the questions at the end, I think. Alec is next.
So I'm just going to, there are so many things about Primo to talk about, but I'm really just going to talk about something very small. And then I'm also going to tail with Michael, who's going to talk more about EBSCO searching in Primo, rather. So the business of item types in Primo and limiting by particular item types is, to me, I mean, well, it was limited. It comes out of the box as a single, for anything that's audiovisual, it comes out as a single type, audiovisual, by default. That's the out-of-the-box configuration. My first thought was that we need to change this. We want to make it a little bit more granular and at least separate the audio from the video, audio from visual. And so our systems librarian enabled that for us and then discovered a couple of major problems with it. Number one, we're in a consortium, and so that means that all consortium members have to make the same decision. And there's another issue as well, which is that the Primo Central Index uses that audiovisual item facet. But if you make a different one for your own institution, then that means that your audiovisual facet is not going to find any of your items, it's only going to find the ones in Primo Central Index. So a couple of, I have 3 different implementations here that I kind of browsed around and found. First of all, so the faceting for the audiovisual item type in Primo comes from Alma records. It comes from several fixed fields, from the leader and the OOA, and that's using those, it kind of puts them all together and it comes up with a single audiovisual type. And that's what we are currently using. The PCI, the Primo Central Index, we actually can't see that, and we don't know how they kind of limit by audiovisual, but that's going to be fixed. So whatever you break out in your own, however you granularize, whatever in the Primo Central Index is still going to only be found by that audiovisual limit there. What Orbis Cascade has done, which includes Portland State University, from which we just acquired a new associate university librarian, so I've been able to speak to him, Nathan Neely, about it. And he pointed out that Orbis Cascade is run by a kind of central board, and they just make decisions for all the members. And within our consortium, CTW, I have to kind of talk to the various members, and we have to come up with some agreement among ourselves, and then we'll go to the kind of administrative people who do Primo. But in any event, they're very granular, as you can see. That they break out into LPs, CDs, video, DVDs, video cassettes, and audio cassettes. And then the thing that I've highlighted in pink, they're calling that streaming audio and video, but in fact what that is the audiovisual, the kind of default audiovisual that is used for PCI. And that means that if you take out all your physical audio and video types in Alma, in your own catalog, all that's left is going to be streaming audio from PCI. And so Orbis Cascade is called it streaming audio, which sort of makes sense. Part of the problem with this is that none of these encompasses any of the others. As soon as you break out CDs as something to limit by, none of the other types is going to catch CDs. So the audiovisual does no longer encompasses CDs once you break out CDs. And so and I think what we're going to probably move to is something over on the right. What I was checking out Harvard, and what they do is they simply broken out all audio and all visual and film as two separate types, but they still have the audio visual. And I'm just to make sure that it wasn't kind of that the two below weren't subsets of the audio visual. I did a search in Hollis and found something that I knew was there as a CD, and I knew was also in DRAM Online. And if I limited by audio visual, it only found the DRAM Online copy. If I'm limited by sound recordings, it only found the CD. So there was no way you could actually, there's no encompassing all audio visual and then break it out to CD or something like that. But nonetheless, and talking with our consortium mates, with people at Trinity College and Conn College, it seems like we are going to move in favor of having a separate audio and visual facet, but probably not more granular than that. I think what Orbis Cascade has done is nice, but I think for a lot of people it's too granular. It means that you have to multiply select all these facets if you want to find all of them. And that could be a bit of a problem for some users, I think. So I'll yield to whoever's going next. And
you'll be back.
Yes, I'll be back.
Hi, I'm actually not going to talk about searching EBSCO and Primo. I'm going to talk about why Tufts chose not to search EBSCO and Primo. First, it's important to understand that Primo as a discovery and delivery system is made up, as Alec was referring to, sort of two components. There is the sort of physical material side and all of the data that you control over things that you have license for, that goes directly into the Primo index. The Primo Central Index, or PCI, is something that is controlled by Ex Libris. It is a major repository of metadata that comes from many, many different places. It comes from publishers, it comes from database aggregators, and what Ex Libris does with that is it normalizes the various forms of metadata that all those different suppliers may produce in, and sort of brings it down to their standard. And that is a source of much complication of, what you would say, accuracy in PCI records. Now, EBSCO, as a supplier, considers itself a competitor and does not want to collaborate in this process of providing information to Ex Libris for the Primo Central Index. So it does not contribute any metadata whatsoever from its resources. Now, there is a lot of overlap because there are third-party providers. Say a publisher will, of a particular journal will provide their data to an aggregator as well as to EBSCO, as probably several other indexing and abstracting tools. So Primo and the Ex Libris folks, and now ProQuest, who owns Ex Libris, say that the amount of overlap is terribly significant, and the material that you wouldn't find is negligible, which is not true. What has the pressure on EBSCO to participate has created a response by the company that they would generate or create and supply an API. So the API would go and search EBSCO products in Primo. Unlike my understanding of a lot of APIs, this particular API has a number of problems. First of all, it doesn't go to EBSCO as a host. It goes to EDS. EDS is EBSCO's version of a discovery platform. So it's not using all of the EBSCO host data. It has its own discovery platform issues. And it requires a login. Primo itself, you can log in, and if you are logged in, your local institution may allow a number of different things. Here at Tufts, we allow inter-campus borrowing through being logged in. But none of the searching capabilities that are inherent in Primo and the Primo Central Index are limited if you are not logged in. So requiring a login just to get access to the EBSCO material was sort of antithetical to the process of actually using Primo. Once you've actually logged in and then selected the EBSCO API, you are scoped to just EBSCO. So you lose the opportunity to integrate results from the Primo Central Index and your own holdings with the EBSCO material. This is because the EBSCO API, as I said, went to EDS, their version of the discovery platform, and their version of a discovery platform, and the Primo discovery platform do not have the same relevancy ranking algorithms, and they don't collaborate. So you'd have to do whatever searches you want to do twice. And if you're going to have to log in and you're going to have to do the search twice, the folks at Tufts decided that the proper solution was to actually use the better product, which is the EBSCO host interface. And so it's become, instead of a technological issue, it's become an instructional issue. So for folks who want to use certain EBSCO databases, and the most important ones for us, because we have a health sciences campus, or like CINAHL and PsycInfo, those things we actually are instructing the students and faculty to go directly to EBSCO host and to do their searches there, because then they're actually maximizing the quality metadata that is actually part of that product and those databases input into the development of that product. So sorry, bad news. At this point in time, it does not look like the standoff between the companies has a resolution. And all I can suggest is that, at least for the large amount of music material that is in EBSCO, that we start lobbying those companies. I have a phone call into Barbara Dodds McKenzie, actually, that they start being more liberal with the release of that data to other platforms, and not relying exclusively on EBSCO as their delivery mechanism. See how far it goes.
I'm going to jump in with a quick housekeeping announcement. I just got notified that we're going to have a test of the fire emergency system at 2 o'clock. So this is just a test. You do not need to vacate. It's perfectly okay. If it's too annoying, you can leave the room, but it hopefully is short-lived. So I apologize. We had to deal with this all day yesterday.
I just want to mention a couple of things that illustrate what Michael was talking about. Wesleyan decided to suffer, and or at least take the bait with this EBSCO thing, and actually create a scope for EBSCO databases. And as you can imagine, an undergrad who doesn't really search things a lot, how are they going to choose that? What is it going to mean to them? So it's a question, but we had it anyways. And so as a result, here's an example of an EBSCO search. I was searching for HMS Pinafore, and it provides very few options on the left sidebar to limit. But it does provide journal title, and what you see on the left, that list, is a complete list of journals that were found in those records. Yet those three in the first match, as a Canadian music educator, American record garden fanfare, are not found in that list. And this is, it's part of the problem that it's fine you can do keyword searching, but you're not going to be able to limit by anything useful. And also you're not going to be able to sort in any useful way. And particularly if you combine the EBSCO with PCI and search them all together, it's going to be even worse. You won't find half of what you're looking for. So we're trying it, and whether anyone uses it, we don't know. In my experience, just looking at Realm, there are quite a few journals that are indexed only in Realm, and so you wouldn't find any alternative sources for them. They tend to be a little more obscure, a little more specialized, and hopefully those are used by the people who actually are willing to take the time to learn to search Realm on their own. For example, music grad students, I'm hoping. But it's very unlikely that any of our undergrads are ever going to use the other one I showed you, to choose the EBSCO scope, since they don't really know what EBSCO means anyway. So I just,
I must say, this is all very alarming. All right, so Harvard is in the midst of migration, and we've been doing the usual, going through all of our data, many of the same things that Rebecca mentioned. And we are coming up in July, and I just wanted to highlight one small thing that we've been working on to give you an idea of what you have to go through to get here. So, browsing, very important to us. Browsing, especially important when you're trying to class material. So when we started to want to hit the browse index, we started with classification. What Alma provided us out of the box was completely unacceptable. Harvard has, what 5,000 different internal classification sequences. Unbelievable what happens when you start back in the 17th century making up your own classifications. So you can imagine we had quite a bit, but actually working through it all logically, we did manage to provide a good setup. And they've, as you can see here, and this list goes on and on, what we've got here in the drop-down menu. We've gotten to the point where I believe we can now find every class. I mean, we tested every class that we could think of. We can not only browse things from the holdings record, but we can also browse classes that come up in the 090 or the 050 in the holdings record, in the bib record, which is rather interesting and unusual. And there is also a temporary call number set up in Alma where if you're moving something through the circulation in Alma somewhere else for a temporary time, you can search that too. So that's not bad. But as I'll show you later, when you actually do the search, there's no main entry, there's only the title, which I just don't know how we're gonna handle that, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. So, you can search by location, and I work in the theater collection, and as you can see, the boxed, you can actually search just boxed stuff. And that's actually pretty good. That's much better than the system that we have now. You can really facet down stuff, but there's still no main entry search, so that's not good. Okay, title browsing, very important for all of us librarians, especially uniform titles of any kind. I'm gonna follow a 130 and say, you know, let's see if we can figure out where it is. So this is Atalo, a libretto. This is our current Hollis Classic attached to Olive, which is our back end until the beginning of July. Doesn't include any of the other platforms that Primo will eventually include. And there's Atalo right there with all of the other titles, the way we like it. Hollis Primo, the way we've just gotten in to start testing, also shows up much the same way as it did in Hollis Classic. This eventually is also allegedly going to search Shared Shelf, Oasis, and which will become Archive Space, and a bunch of other platforms that are all going to allegedly come together in one place. We'll see. Through Hollis, in all versions, all of the titles browse together within context with the formal title. Fine, we like that. Now, Alma provides quite a few options in their browse searches. You can search under names, subjects, titles, blah, blah, blah. Some of them can be broken down a little bit more, like under names, as you can see. There are several ways that you can actually limit them, which is a good thing. So let's look for our Atalo libretto. Surprise! It's not there in the title index. I don't know what to tell you. People who are in Alma now, maybe you can help me out. I have not yet found. They swear that 240s are indexed somewhere. I haven't found it yet. So, but if we start looking under names, there's a 130. Why would anyone ever look under names for 130? I mean, it is a 1XX, I guess maybe that's why they don't understand it, but. So, 130 should browse the titles, right? No question about that. So, the 245s, 246, and the 700Ts all browse together in what they're calling the title index. And as such, it's reasonably acceptable. Doesn't include 240s, doesn't include 130s, doesn't include 740s, those little things that we don't really think about all that often. If any title is followed, if you have a uniform title that has a subfield P, that will break out, and you can actually find, in some cases, you could find Traviata, Sempre Libero, or something like this. If it's followed by selections, if it's followed by a language, if it's followed by vocal scores, librettos, any of that, nothing. It's all under the main subfield A or subfield T. There's no titles from the 666s. So here's a 240 to follow. Cremona Hegedus, someone in who's Hungarian can tell me better how to do that. Shows up perfectly well in both of our current indexes. Where's Waldo? No, Waldo name. I do not understand why they just don't think that 240s are important in any way. So what happens if we browse even more complex titles? Titles with subfield P's, titles with languages, titles with subfield S's. So if you browse title of Traviata, it says 200 plus. In fact, if you look very closely there, you'll see that there's actually 149. So it's a 220 plus quite a bit. What you get on the right-hand side is something that is supposed to be drop-down menus that you can sort and that you can zero in a little bit more. Doesn't really work. So definitely need a way to browse within these larger titles. Now, Harvard is working on a possible fix for this. We hope that, we're going to suggest that we should be able to make that browse in the right pane include the creator, date, series, titles, preferred titles. We still don't know whether we're still going to have to open each record to find that, but if at least it is in the order by that, it'll be a little bit easier than the totally unacceptable way that it is now. But what about all those things that we just saw under Traviata, like Addio del Passato? So there's 15 records, and over here we've got 15 records, so surely that's all the ones we were looking for. Sorry, that's 700 subfield P. There's still no 240s with the Addio del Passato in there. Don't know what to tell you. And again, if you look under Verdi, under uniform title names, you would think if you looked under Verdi, blah, 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 or Traviata, it would be there. Nope, still just the 130s and 730s are in there. So what about if we go into the names and we don't even make any selections with the source code, just put in names, Verdi, Traviata, what do we get? So we've got it. We've got an authority record here, but the authority is for the name title Verdi Traviata. And over here we have 26 records, but what are those? Surprise, 600s. Now, I don't know about you, but under names, that's just not where I would look for this stuff. Now I recognize that we're all smart people. We'll be able to teach people where to find all this stuff, but I'm imagining the pressure that I'm under to get things done and the very complex things that we do and the 12 million plus records that we have to sort through to get to what we're trying to find. And my hair is already white. I got nowhere to go. So what you say, wait a minute, what about that Traviata Hebrew? You're wrong, it's all there. But no, that's actually indexing us another 700. That's not indexing what we think it is indexing. It's just, I just don't know where we're gonna go with that. So it's a little easier to talk about the subject thing because there's a little quirk in Alma right now where the 100s and 700s don't bother with the subfield Qs. And now you may say, well, who cares about that? But there are an awful lot of musicians' names that have subfield Qs in, and let's just look at T.S. Eliot because that was the one I happened to think of. So we've got two things going on here. We've got the T.S. Eliot without it, and of course it then browses without the subfield Q. It doesn't just browse with the subfield Q and you just don't see it. No, it browses, and in some cases that means it's off the screen from where you're looking. But in the 100s and the 700s, those are all in here. It's only the 600s that you're going to find in here. So and here is one that I actually found. Don't know where we're going to go with this. And there is no option for browsing names as a subject. So if, for instance, you've just cataloged a play about Richelieu, and you're trying to find, 600 Richelieu, blah, 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 drama, I don't know where you're going to find it. I'm sure we'll learn, and we do have the option to use Primo. And Primo, people I know who are already in Alma, they just have Primo open on the side, and they use Primo for a lot of these things. Our problem is that at Harvard, some of the workflows, there are a lot of suppressed records. So the records that we need to be able to see, that we will only be able to see in Alma, if we look for them in Primo, we might be in the right place, but we might not. So, what are we going to do? We really need a main entry in the shelf listing. Don't know where we're going to get it. We're working on it. All of the titles need to browse together. I mean, that's just basic stuff, right? I don't know how Alma could have been around all this time and they don't get this. All of the, titles, everything. And the subjects, obviously, subfield cues have to, browse and display, no question about that. And there needs to be names as part of subjects. And there are larger issues. Names that are family names are also a problem. Geographic names, also, all of the jurisdictional stuff, also a problem. Anything from the NAF, problem. So obviously that's something that we need to do about it. We have bigger issues on our plate. It's not just our 17th century classification that we've got records that are one line. So just like with Rebecca, we've had to go through millions of records to take brief records to be not brief enough so that they will actually migrate. Always a problem. And ex libris, they're trying, and they're really in good faith trying very hard, but they just, if you say, look, you gotta browse the subfield queue, they're like, we gotta find serials. We don't even have any of the serials. So they've got other things to deal with. There's an area within Alma, within the documentation, the ex libris documentation, where you can suggest fixes and other people in the community can vote. So we're thinking about, well, what are we gonna do? We've gotta start putting information out on listservs and saying, all right, we've got this one out here, you gotta vote for this. Buying, and I'm from Chicago, so it's like, buy votes, do whatever you're gonna do. The music community, we are only gonna have power if we come together about these things. I mean, we're starting to do that. The Alma group in MLA is terrific, and they've been very helpful to me in trying to get where we're going. But we can do more. And all I can suggest is that, just keep trying. Oops. Wow, my U disappeared there. Oh well, you can imagine what that is. All right, that's me.
Okay. Yay.
Well, I'm really glad I'm going last, because your problem's my problem, and your problem's my problem, and your problem is my problem too. Wouldn't you love to be me? Okay, so this really is my fourth rodeo in all of this, and every single time it was a group of libraries, right? So not just us. It was never just us. It was always us and someone else. But back when there were only 3 of us to be someone else, there were 13 special technical services people who helped make that happen. And 4 of them belonged to my library. And then the next time we went around about that, there were 8 of us, and then there was only a group of 9 for the consortium, and 3 of them were at my library. And now that we're going from III Sierra, have done that, it's turned off, it's gone as of a year ago, and we're on OCLC-WMS, there is, when we did the migration, there was a committee of 4 in the consortium, none of which was from my library. We had one person in my library who, God bless her heart, such a librarian, such a mensch. She is a serials cataloger, because the head of cataloging and head of technical services had retired and not been replaced, and our music cataloger retired and not been replaced, and so she did her due diligence, but issues followed, I mean, how can they not, right? So, onward to, this is our group, was our group in III. Helen Consortium, 10 academic libraries, shared catalog for principally shared resource sharing. We have huge federal grant that moves stuff around the state lightning fast to all the users. Now we're 7, and we have world share management in the cloud, so we don't have to buy a server. We're still trying to share this catalog, which is really WorldCat, which is hard to do, and do rapid resource sharing with each library relying on the knowledge gained from other colleagues in our Helen Consortium and also the wider OCLC Community Center. And I'm with you. Community Center works the same way. We hate this, change this. We will buy votes. So if you have a scheme for that, we want to know a good scheme for buying votes in a community center. Okay, we also have WorldCat Discovery. Because we have a consortium policy now that says you can go your own way, your catalog doesn't have to look like the guy down the road's catalog. After a significant period of weapons of mass destruction, as I call it here on the slide, patrons were incensed with the discovery layer, just incensed. And I don't mean just the faculty and the sophisticated staff. The students were incensed because here they were looking for their one little score, and on top of their head land hundreds of citations to things. It's a review of a CD. It's a comment on an interview. It's a who knows what, and they are paging through this 10 records at a time, not changeable. Scroll, and finally, the good ones come to the reference desk and the main body of them just disappear. So we chose to turn off all of the databases. This is what our search screen looks like. There's a DOM box on our front page, meaning a single search. We chose to teach people to come to this, even though our administration insists that we keep the single search box on the front. But we now have very prominently large red letters. It says advanced search, and we always teach people that, show people that. But even that, as you can see from my comments here, is problematic. It's better than the single search, but, okay, so the teacher in me can't stay behind the thing. Sorry for the lousy slide. It is dim, and I apologize for that. These are facets. The default is they're rolled up. Can't see them, and most of our undergraduates are not familiar enough with facets to know what will happen when they limit their search, and so they tend to ignore it. What they tend to do is they tend to keep adding rows to stuff. Oh, I'll just add more rows, and another row, and another row. Except a lot of what they put in those rows, which if you were in a periodical database would be a searchable field, are not searchable fields here. So they just keep adding stuff and not finding anything. Databases, we do have them lurking. They're under other databases, 55 of the 80 that we have. EBSCO is not the only people who do not play nice and want to go, no, not us, it's OCLC's problem. And OCLC turns around and says, no, it's not, it's their problem, it's the vendor's fault, it's their data that's corrupt. You all who were at Portland probably went to the Oxford nuclear meltdown. My music department was so reliant on the bibliographic information at the end of every one of those articles, and that resolution jumped to the book, jumped to the article, jumped to the, and now they jump, the lemmings go off the cliff, and what can you do? So we've hidden all of that. Patrons can invoke it if they wanted, but we tend to hide them and not suggest that they ever invoke it in this catalog environment. It just does not work well. Okay, I'm trying to get in comments that other people made. Music patrons are particularly at a disadvantage here because the majority of patrons, overall, they're looking for books in the catalog. But our patrons are looking for books, and they're also looking for scores, and they're also looking for sound recordings, and we get sound recordings and video recordings in both streaming and print. We have e-books and regular books. All of those are problematic in an environment where citations are sneaking in and people are searching in that mode. Okay, so patrons get initiated into the mysteries of the universe, which in all truth, there are things that Andrea said and that Rebecca said, and I'm thinking, heard that once upon a time. I will tell you how long ago the dinosaurs roamed. My cataloging professor at Columbia, fellow alum, was Carlisle Frary. Anybody recognize that name? Nod, nod, nod. So, for the prize of the day, who is Carlisle Frary? Do you remember? Yeah, he's a cataloging guy, it's true. Carlisle Frary was one of the original authors of ACR 1. Sadly, Carlisle Frary died in the middle of one of my cataloging classes, but we won't go there. Not my fault, prof. Okay, so what are we looking at here? I wish I could bump this up for you, so we'll walk through it again. Student actually comes in. This is real. It's a real student who came in a couple of weeks ago. He was looking for Brahms. He was thinking he might be looking for a concerto by Brahms. Okay, not really sure which one, but they've been discussing concertos in class. So he threw Brahms into the catalog randomly and got a list of all sorts of stuff. This thing is impossible to read, so I'll read it for you. Translating from the German, it's a concerto for violin with orchestra. It's opus 77. Right here, he stopped on page 2. This is record number 24, so he had to page forward to see this. It says downloadable musical score, and he was like, whoa, yes! I'll just be able to grab a hold of this and read it from somewhere else. But notice up here, if you could read it, it would say held by Helen Library Consortium, which means it's not us. It would say Rick Adams Library if it were our material. But not knowing that, he opened this record looking for the link. So he's looking for the downloadable link because in everything else he's ever encountered, if you open the big record, there's a link in it somewhere that he can beep on. So downloadable, maybe the link is in the top main material, right? Author, title, and the holdings information. No, not there. Okay, so here's a tiny annoyance of the system. These are also rolled outs. That's description. If it were rolled up, it would be black. You'd be easily able to read it, even on my lousy slide. Roll it down, and it disappears from view. Still says description, but you can't see it. He's looking in here, he's looking in here, he's looking in here. Is it here? No, it isn't here either. He rolls this down. This is one of the biggest bugbears in our system, because this is where patrons, if they roll this down, encounter the problem with clustering. Records are by default clustered in this catalog, and a large percentage of the time inappropriately clustered, because he had an aha moment here. He said, oh, no link, but look, thing from Adams Library, it says so right here. But you know what this is? It's the Concerto for Violin, Violoncello, and Orchestra, Opus 102. Why is this clustered with Opus 77? Because it's an error that occurs over and over and over again on multiple records. To decluster, I have to make a specific request to our metadata librarian, please have these records declustered. I don't know how many I have turned in of this kind of thing. So patrons are stumped by clustering for 3 reasons. Reasons like this, it's not the right thing. Reasons like the E and the print are clustered, but only one thing can show at the top of the record. So it has to prefer one of those, and it often prefers the one we would really prefer it not prefer. Okay, so on to additional mysteries, and they have to do with authority. Again, apologies for the lousy slide. This time someone was looking for the composer John Adams. The goal was, I'd like to see all the stuff you have by John Adams and about him too. In our old III catalog, as much as people used to whine and whinge about it, it could do that in a snap and accurately too. Everything on this screen from the top to here is the second president of the United States. And there is nothing that will tell you that in the author entry of any of these records at the top level. Way down here, our extremely astute sophomore noticed John Adams' earbox. I'll bet that's my guy. And even more astute, this person opened the author link, very rightly assuming that it would leap over to his John Adams, not the rest of these bozos that showed up in the list. But no, because it is a keyword author link. And so he got the same screen over again. Yes, so he gets the total prize for the year for student persistence and acuity in vision, because he noticed there was a facet over here called author, and there were a bunch of John Adamses in it. So he looked at these, there are 5 of them clustered here, and then a show more button. He dropped the show more button, and that's when I think he either decided he was going to cry or he was going to show up at the reference desk. So he chose the latter, good for him. But there are people in there like, why is John A. Dix the 4th thing on that author facet? He is in a book about the second president of the United States, and he's a sub-editor. Just want to, you just want to go postal on these people. At least I do. All right, so there are lots of things about our, that's 5. Okay, good, 5. And now I get to read the end, right? We're relying on the kindness of our colleagues. We are. We're relying on the community center. We're relying on other Helen metadata librarians. We're relying on, I have to give a shout out right here to other music librarians, to Nara Newcomer from Moog, who's done absolutely yeoman work in trying to dope out stuff for me, because she's been working with WMS in a discovery mode, which we discarded for a couple of years now, and she's really been super duper helpful. And the J&J show, Jay Holloway and Jay Whites, have, I have to sneak stuff to them, because officially they're not the people who are supposed to be answering my questions. I'm supposed to go to the community center and I'm supposed to post stuff. It's insane. When I asked OCLC, who are my New England compatriots who have WMS, the answer to that question was, how about you go look at Marshall Breeding's librarytechnology.org site. You could do some searches there. What catalog provider, system provider tells you they can't tell you who their customers are who live in your geographic area? I just wanted to shoot myself. So, this is to say that we are still hopeful that the things that we turn in like this and buy the votes for will be changed sooner rather than later. But our patrons who have real needs, as in they are not first years, they are not searching for whatever you might have about child abuse, they're looking for something specific, they have a goal in mind. So we're not talking high-level research faculty here, although they're being severely disserved by this catalog. We are disappointed in the extreme. It's almost as if OCLC has a split personality. Who is this? This can't be OCLC. Not the OCLC I grew up with as a professional. Those people knew what the bleep they were doing. And apparently on the metadata side, they kind of still do. But on this catalog side, it's as if they took Kool-Aid in great quantities and now they are someone else, or possibly a zombie organization. It's distressing, but that's our job. Our job is to get the patrons out of distress. And if anybody offers you this, run.
Are we over time?
Let me take a look at the schedule. I think we're generally in good shape. You are scheduled
scheduled until 2:40. We have plenty of time for questions.
Questions or comments?
There'll be no
Don't steal lunch. We're only almost 20 minutes, but we do have plenty of time for questions. Are there any questions? That'll make it simple.
Complaints. Remonstrations. Right, ranting is encouraged. It's cathartic.
I have a question. Is there anyone out here on the Alma system already? Can you find 240s in the browse?
Tried.
Okay. I was the only one to know. I looked everywhere.
So I'll throw out a question. For those of you who have already been through the migration, what were some things that you wish you had known to do as you were preparing for it that you only realized in retrospect you should have done?
The two things I can think of, which the first one has much less of an impact on music, and that's perhaps, but electronic resources. The whole model of how they're dealt with is so different, and I wish we understood it better. I think we would have made different decisions. We did a lot of cleanup. And then the other thing, and this is partly the process, we spent so much time working on Alma, and we didn't have as much time or didn't have as much understanding of Primo. And the out-of-the-box settings are really not that good. Like a really simple thing, that keyword searches, I think they search 505s, but they didn't display right away. And they still don't display. Formatted, so 505s that have subfield T and subfield R. If it's all just straight text, that's fine. So tweaks like that, we can tweak it. I just wish we'd known more ahead of time because it's almost, not quite a year, but 3/4 of a year, and there's still tons of things we're wanting to fix. I wish we'd gotten more of a head start on that.
I actually went to my head of technical services and my head of public services, so I thought there would probably be questions like this that I knew nothing about. When Tufts migrated, we have a library technology team of 3 people for the university, which is not enough. When we moved from VRA to Millennium, the process and the product allowed for a fairly large implementation team of library staff from all corners of the institution. The migration from Millennium to Alma and Primo did not allow for that. It's incredibly technically complicated. There are lots of decisions to make, and with only 3 people and having to keep the place running, we didn't have enough time to do a lot of the preparation necessary. I don't think we did a bad job, but the reality is, and this has been sort of confirmed by the members of the ILS department, talking to their colleagues and peers in other institutions that have done this, count on the next 2 years being nothing but cleanup. It's a 3-year process regardless. No matter how much you prepare and how much work you do, you're not ready for the tsunami. Because when you flip the switch, you have to start doing work. And nobody knows how to use the system. And all the things that you didn't think about when you start trying to do the work, you're still trying to learn the system, and it's not doing what you thought it was going to do, then everything slows down. So it's just been incredibly difficult. E-resource data was one of the areas that was particularly problematic that the head of technical services mentioned, as was acquisitions and order records. The way that data migrates is not always the way it's expected, and where the order information was in Millennium, particularly be able to do like fund data queries, didn't transfer over into an area in Alma that is queryable. So historical data is now lost.
That might have worked better from Voyager to Alma because they're owned by the same company. Wait, you say Olive or
No.
Millennium?
Millennium, yeah. The other thing that the head of public services said that he kind of wished he'd really understood differently was the sort of mental structure of the systems are very different. Millennium relies a lot on statuses to describe material and sort of what's going on with it and everything, and those don't port over at all to Alma. And so there were things that, whole swaths of data that just kind of disappeared, like everything that was at the bindery. It's just nowhere. Because the bindery is not a location, it's a point of work in a workflow. And so trying to figure out how to understand what workflow meant and to create new patterns of behavior among staff was a learning curve process that's still ongoing.
We had the same problem, and I forgot to even talk about that. Yeah, this like moving things around when it's being worked on. Yeah,
Many
totally
steps.
different system, or different way of thinking about it.
Yeah, that was true for us too. Lots of stuff that we imagined, at least I imagined somehow it would migrate. Either it migrated inappropriately or it didn't migrate at all. And as you say, the cleanup is huge. Our one metadata librarian, also the e-resources person, also the serials person, all one person. She has spent the last year, seriously, I got an email yesterday in my email box, and I told my husband, pour a drink. Because it was an email that said, hooray, today I have touched the last of all the multi-volume sets, and now they all have some volumes on them. That included all my monuments, it included the Public Papers of the President series, it included all of those things you can think of that had more than one volume attached to them, had none when they migrated. So a year's worth of work by that poor person, along with the rest of her duties, of course. And she deserves the champagne pop for today, but there will be something else, I'm sure, that's on her plate for next week that still needs cleanup after a year. John?
So I was just wondering, in the process of your various institutions of deciding which platform to move to, which RLS platform to move to, what was involved in that process, and how much were you consulted in that or not? I mean, how much were you involved in discussions about which platform are we going to move to from now?
Wesleyan's pretty small, but
Yeah, I would say we were both involved
Yeah.
very much in the decision. Yeah. I mean, that, and Ex Libris was my choice. I mean, among
Yeah.
others.
it felt like there really weren't that many options out there that are
Yeah.
viable.
Maybe Carolyn could talk about this.
It
What?
was a consortial decision.
Yes, it was,
Yeah.
sorry. We should mention that, Wesleyan
say
and
this
Trinity
other
got
consortial, yeah.
But, and so we had consortial groups. So we had a primo group that was made up of members of all three schools.
And I have to say, at
Discovery.
WMS,
Yeah.
what was the year before we migrated, we were at that session where people were reporting at
At
MLA on
Yeah.
the world share, and we both got on our phones and emailed back to Connecticut, and, because that was one of the choices, we said, we cannot get this, this cannot be our choice.
Yes, we did the same thing at Tufts. I mean, that was off the table really early in the process. So it really was down to Sierra and Primo Alma. And because we were a Millennium client with Innovative, we knew the problems that we were having with the company, which is a lot of communication, and the company's business practices in terms of how you submitted for change and how those changes were decided and all that kind of stuff. And we wanted a more involved and interactive process. And I will say that even after ProQuest bought Ex Libris, Ex Libris is still a much more responsive company. They have been working very hard with us in trying to get this right and to make it work. What we will be doing sometime probably in before the end of the calendar year, is there is a process by which you can invite Ex Libris to come back. And they're not correcting things for you. They're basically looking at the things that you've established as workflows and sort of assessing their efficiency. You say, well, did you realize that if you did this in the system this way, you could cut out 7 steps? It doesn't correct some of the migration problems, but it will help the ongoing work as it moves forward.
We contracted for the same thing and had the first visit. They do one visit where they sort of learn how you're doing things, they write a report and come back a second time. So we're in between those 2 visits. And even just the first visit, he already made suggestions that I think will be big helps.
Well, Harvard does everything by committee and decree, so of course I wasn't involved in this at all. I don't know whether anyone in the room was involved. A committee was established to investigate Alma,
which my understanding was that they were essentially told, we're going to get Alma, so make it work.
Yeah.
And they worked very hard, and they contracted with Ex Libris a certain number of things that had to happen by the time we went live and everything. But, you know, they had such a limited amount of time to do that, of course, they missed a lot, you know, the 240 problem. That's not on anybody's radar, right? They were looking at much bigger issues. So I have to say that was really, we had the committee was running for about Carrie, are you here?
Yes.
You were on the committee, weren't you?
No.
No?
I don't do Alma, I only do Primo.
4 months maybe? It seemed to me that they were investigating actively for about 4 months, and then they came back and surprise, said we're gonna get Alma. And we were all just terribly surprised. So from then on, it was just trying to figure out how to make it work. And then we're still figuring out how to make it work, both in all the ways that everyone else.
I think it's really important to acknowledge that Ex Libris does consider this to be a product that is still in development. And like all things that are in development, it's buggy. And there are things that surprise them sometimes as much as that surprises us, which is, you know, fair. And I'm glad that they are as communicative as they are and willing to be supportive in terms of that process. I hope that continues because it's got potential to be a very good product. It's just not there yet.
And they do new releases every month. That is a big plus. And we were in Olive before, I don't know about Millennium, but we got new releases more than a year often between releases.
Well,
Yeah.
we didn't update them as often as they were made.
Ah,
So that's
okay. But
But with Millennium, often there was a reason not to.
There may have been that. I mean, so Harvard always had to say, well, we didn't like this part, this part. We were like
Yeah.
2 years behind on all of it.
Oh, we were
That's my
way
understanding. We were way behind. So.
I really liked Andrea's suggestion to really harness the Music Library Association as a whole, because there's such things that are so specific to music materials.
agreed.
Yeah, so I don't know. I have to figure out some way to do that.
Well, I think
Well,
the
we
Alma
tried.
committee.
The Alma interest group in MLA have been very helpful. The meetings at annual are very helpful. And they have, if you belong to the interest group, you can send an email out and it goes to everybody on the list. And that's very helpful. I was trying to find out whether in Alma you could use MarcEdit or Open Refine on pre-existing records, which we in Olive, we could use MarcEdit on records that didn't exist, and then we could put them in, fine, but we could not edit records using any of these things. And so there were a lot of people that I found through MLA who had been working on various projects and gave me very encouraging information about the APIs that would attach to Alma. So yeah, I recommend everyone to get connected with people because we are a smaller community. You know, we're not the sciences. And because we're not the sciences, we gotta help each other.
I'm wondering if some or all of you can talk about, just briefly, the kind of prep work that you did before you migrated, specifically time frame. Like how much time did you dedicate to prep work on your data before you migrated?
Oh boy.
Not enough.
I mean, we definitely started the process a year ahead of time. And our systems librarian was sort of the point person. She was a very good project manager. So she was the one that investigated Ex Libris' suggestions, as well as other schools that had done presentations at conferences. And, you know, came up with a whole list of potential cleanup projects and tried to figure out which ones had to happen, which ones would be nice, which ones are just too big, we could never get to it, which ones just didn't really matter. And as far as time, I mean, yeah, so the large-scale time frame was about a year. Although actually most of the projects we tried to finish up before the last few months, because at that point we just wanted to be doing testing. But we did have a temporary cataloger for various reasons, retirements or people leaving. We had enough funds for a cataloger for that year. She mostly worked on
Cleanup.
yeah, pretty much data cleanup. I was saying a little more electronic resources than print things, but she worked on everything. And then I mostly know the cataloging side, so I probably spent, I don't know, a quarter of my time actually doing data cleanup for that year.
I'd say a quarter of time
Yeah.
is about right. I mean, again, huge committees, and it's all very sort of siloed at Harvard, but we've got in OIS, they're identifying large groups of records that are going to be, like the brief records I was talking about, where there's only a title, or there isn't even a title, or a title and there's no date, no publication information. They're separating out a lot of these really big problems by library, and they are sending reports to the libraries, and then the library people were parsing them out amongst catalogers that can actually handle what's there. And if we can make, some of them we can fix with global changes, some of them we can fix looking at the record, some of them we have to pull the stuff and actually look. And 12 million records, it's not going to happen. We're doing as much as we can. But I would say that it's easily a quarter of my time.
Yeah.
And we started actually actively working about 18 months in advance. But again, it's a much larger system than most, and I think because of that, the complexity was more daunting and challenging.
But if I could just piggyback on that just a little bit at Harvard, I mean, so those are the more egregious things that follow the list of this is what you should do ahead of time. But at every turn, you unearth another whole thing that would really be better if you could fix it ahead of time. And then there's that other thing. I mean, it seems like an endless amount of stuff that you could do ahead of time.
The one thing I would say though, in Alma, the capabilities for searching for like conditions or groups of records and making global changes, it's way easier in Alma than it is in Voyager. Some things you have to fix to have them migrate.
Yeah, identifying whether it's something that you must fix before migration is the number one thing.
Yeah.
Because like Rebecca said, we have large classes of things that need to be fixed, but we can do it in Alma.
Yeah. Actually, our systems librarian and I are going to Aluna, which is Ex Libris Users of North America conference. So it's actually a users organized event. It's not run by Ex Libris, although there's a gazillion Ex Libris people there. And we're doing a presentation on data cleanup, like just from our experience, what we did, what we wish we'd done, what we didn't do. So once we actually put together our slides, I could share them.
That'd be fabulous.
And it's not just the library that's responsible in all this process. I know there was a lot of work that our public services and access services folks did with systems of record because of the nature of trying to import all of the data about personnel.
Yeah.
To make sure that all of that mapped properly.
Yeah.
And to make sure that
And
everything,
Primo. The connection, but as Carrie said, the connection between Alma and Primo.
I think there probably needs to be a Primo users group
Yes.
as well,
Yeah.
because they are two different products and
They
they
are.
don't necessarily communicate well
No.
at times. And there are things that are handled absolutely differently within each product.
Yeah.
So for us, it was a bit of a shock that our public face was no longer mapping directly from the technical services back end.
We're generally much happier with Alma than we are with Primo so far. Yeah. Although we haven't been doing the title browsers, we didn't realize that glitch there.
If you don't know about it, don't look.
And whatever you do, I mean, even if you manage to get all of your data cleaned up and everything is perfect, which
Never happens.
I was given an example by Tech Services where they got all of our subscription information and stuff all like uniform.
Oh.
Wow, it was really great. And now what they found when they go to try to renew a subscription that's already been existing, that was not a new subscription that was entered into Alma, that they actually have to deactivate that subscription in order to reactivate it to actually get it to register in the system properly. So it's like, oh, well, shit. That's a lot of work for nothing.
I did also develop a whole new respect for public services circulation. I thought, like, oh, cataloging is the most complicated thing that happens. Boy, when I saw it, like setting up loan rules and all the interactions between patron types and material, it was amazing.
Yeah, that's right, with 73 libraries.
Yeah, I can only imagine. So.
Anybody else?
Well, I want to thank our panel